Okay, so hi everyone. I am going to talk in this third session on securing and enjoying your retirement on three very important topics. And like I said in these sessions, what I want to focus on is more the psychology. The math is important, but like what I always feel when I interact with people is that there is a lot of anxiety around finance, personal finance, right? So they always kind of worried about, how much do I need to save? How will I ever build a corpus such that I can retire? And then how will I have a comfortable retirement? Those people who are retired, often have this question about how much can I spend? Because there may be all kinds of expenses, this, that, and the other, etc. And I don't know if I have enough. Will the returns be okay? So there are all these kind of questions, right? And obviously, there are no 100% answers to all this. There can be extremely unexpected events which happen, but it's a question of probabilities and attitude there. Like so, when you get up in the morning and say step out or get into your car and go to work, there's not 100% certainty that you will reach work alive. It's probably 99.9999% probable, but there is that remote possibility that you'll be in an accident and you'll be killed, right? So just keep this background in mind as we start talking about how we can optimize, how can we secure and enjoy our retirement with a fairly high degree of certainty, because then it can help you take certain decisions on how much you can spend. Can you fly business class instead of economy? If you really like eating out or going into a five-star hotel, can you do that? If you like watching cricket, can you go and watch the World Cup, for instance? So these are all items which are things that you can think about if you've done some very basic math and put your house in order. So with that, let's get started with the spend calculator. So this is for people who have retired. Now, being retired doesn't mean that you can't get an income. Like I retired at something like 45, which meant that I could do whatever I chose to do. Uh, and mostly I did pro bono work because I didn't need an income. But there were times when, like, I became the CEO of Starlink in India, where I did have a job for a few months. But then, I realized that Starlink would take a while, and this was not something I wanted to do. So again, I had the ability to say, hey, I don't need this job, and it's a distraction. So I want to step down. So that is what really retirement and financial freedom is all about, right? So with that said, so what we're going to talk about is how much can I spend each year to reach my desired corpus at age 90? A simple calculator to help you answer that question. Many people die with too much money left and do not enjoy their retirement, right? So there was a friend I was talking to, and he said that, if I had, if I were to die today, this was a person with a very high net worth, I would die with 100 crores. And in some ways that would make me sad because I died with so much money, right? Now I'm pretty good at making money and doing things which I do. So if for the next 10 years, I continue doing as well as I have been doing, then possibly this 100 crores will become 1,000 crores. And at some stage I'll die. So would it make me happier to die with 1,000 crores or sadder, right? So this actually uh, is an important philosophical thing or psychological thing to think about is that at some point in time, if you have wealth, you have to ask yourself, what is it that I'm creating wealth for? And you may want to even give money away to charities or create your own foundation or things like that. So this whole question of spend is also for very high net worth individuals, coupled with give, right? How much do you want to spend, give, etc. Now, some people feel that they want to earn money and then secure the lives of the next 7 generations. Like there's a saying, "Saat pushto ke liye," right? In my view, and I have some personal experience with that, and there's a book called A Millionaire Next Door, which essentially shows that people who inherited money, I'd say before the age of 35, they compared them with people who didn't inherit money and then looked at their net worth at the age of 50. Now, the surprising thing was that people who had inherited, and this was at least $500,000 that they had to inherit, their net worth would be higher because they had inherited all this money and then they were in. So, barring two professions, I think teaching and some other profession, they categorized it by profession. The people who inherited money had less net worth than the people who didn't inherit money because that inheritance robbed them of the thing to work hard and do things well. So it's a very curious thing. So like I said, why these sessions are a little long is because we're going to go into the psychology as well as the math. Okay. So with that, Vijay, I'll stop and just pause a bit and ask you that on this introduction, do you have any questions?
No, that's a good intro, Sanjay, for people who want to begin with, bit of the planning, have a goal, have a vision, and work towards that.
Okay, so let's jump into the spend calculator sample. Okay, so here you will see that there are some green cells where you have to put in your input. There are red cells which are calculated, and the yellow cell is a guess, right? Where you iterate and you can see how far away you are from your goal. So let's see how this works. So in this case, for the example, which of course you can change, it's like 68, your current age. Okay. And the person who's 68 wants to plan till 90. So this is not necessarily the age you will die because nobody knows that, but the age you want to plan till. Okay. So the years left are calculated as 22, right? Now, you'll see here that this goes to 22 years, but you can always add columns or delete columns, and you can drag the formulae. You can also, of course, adapt this. This is extremely simple. People have very, very complex calculators to do this. I've tried to make this very simple. Okay, so then the next thing that you need to input is the inflation rate. Now, this inflation rate is very interesting because, do you just take the published inflation rate? Do you take the inflation rate of things that you spend on? So rather than debating what is correct, use whatever inflation rate you think is right. Like now, like a person like me, I have assets in the US, I have assets in India. What inflation rate do I take? Do I take the Indian inflation rate? Do I take the US? Do I take a blended rate? Okay, so without getting too complicated, I take a inflation rate. And the best part is that you can change this. Like suppose I took 6%, I can make it say 7% or 5% and see what's the effect, right? So that's the inflation rate. Then the next thing is the corpus return. Now, on the corpus return, it's very important that the more you allocate to equity, the higher the expected return and risk. You can change the corpus return and see how much it affects the amount you can spend, right? So here in this example, I've taken 12% as the corpus return. And let's say this is an India-based thing, the inflation is 6%, corpus return is 12%. Now, this whole exercise, you might have heard some people say that as you age, the amount of percentage that you have in equity should reduce, right? So if you are, say, 70 years old, then 100 minus your age should be your percentage in equity. According to me, that is all not very good, right? Because if you are in a very hand-to-mouth kind of retirement, then it may be adequate. But in most cases, quite a few of us, especially if we have planned well, will have more money than we need. So then the question is, are you saving for your children? Are you saving for your grandchildren? What age are you going to put, right? So basically, the whole idea, which is covered more in the asset allocation session, which was the first session of the Securing and Enjoying Retirement. And all these will be available in a playlist on this thing. Oh, did I start recording this? Or I forgot to. Yeah, it was recording. Yeah. Okay. So, so it'll be available as a playlist, and you can watch these. Keeping that in mind, let's say the corpus return is 12%, right? Now, the corpus size that this particular individual has is very large. It is 40 crores. Okay. This is actually a real life example, but yeah, you can change it. I mean, in your case, it may not be 40 crores, or maybe even more than that, like let's say 100 crores, whatever. Now, the terminal corpus that this person wanted at the age of 90 was also 40 crores, right? So they said that, look, I still want to, because, I have a child who's not doing so well. So I just want to secure the future for this child, so I want to have this 40 crores when I die or at the age of 90. So that's the corpus expected in the last plan year. And then you have the terminal corpus in today's money, right? So it's very important to explain to the person that like 40 crores 22 years from now is not going to be the same as 40 crores today, right? So you can discount it by the rate of inflation, right? So that gets automatically calculated for you. So it's about 11 crores. And like I said, this is a guess. This 313 here is a guess. Now, at the top, you'll see that the terminal corpus with this guess is 4076, which the desired terminal corpus is 4,000. So the difference is 76, which is quite small. Let's see what happens when I change this. Suppose I make this 250. You can see that I have a huge surplus, right? So this means that if I spend 2.5 crores a year, I will end up with a surplus. Now, this particular individual was spending about 1 crore, okay, a year. So they were underspending massively. Now, this doesn't mean that you go ahead and increase your spending to spend 3.13 crores, because that's a lot of money. And if you're spending 1 crore, you can't suddenly start spending 3 crores unless you are very extravagant and you splurge. All right. So that's not the intention of this. But the intention is that you can loosen your purse strings and enjoy life, right? Without thinking about money. How much does this cost? So in this person's case, they wanted to buy a car, and they had a certain status. So they wanted to buy a car which kind of reflected that status, so which might cost, say, close to 1 crore. Now, could they buy that car, or should they buy a 20 lakh car? Right? That was the kind of question that was being answered. And if they were spending, they're spending too much. There was this anxiety: I'm spending too much. Will this money kind of disappear? So if you do very simple math, if you take 313 and multiply it by 22, you're going to get something like over 66, 70 crores, right? While we're saying here you started with 40 and you ended with 40 and you spent 77. So how does this add up? Now, this is the power of compounding, right? And the difference is that this 12% and 6% is your real return, right? So that is why the math works out. So if you see the tables below in the calculator and see the formulas, you started with 4,000, okay, which actually could be a formula. So it could be equal to this figure, your current corpus, okay, instead of being hard-coded. And then it's 480 is B10, the corpus return into your corpus size. Now, this corpus return could also be if you're getting an income. Let's say you have some real estate properties, you're getting rent. If you have like a mutual fund corpus, or so in this, you have to take your unrealized return plus your realized return, which again is covered in a previous section section on the balance sheet, which was the second session. So, this is, so you want to, and during this exercise, you don't have to be very conservative or very aggressive because you can play around, which we will do. Okay. And then you have your expense here, which is like the guess number. So it comes here. And then you have your end corpus. So very simple. Then the end corpus becomes a start corpus, blah, blah, blah. You'll see that the expense increases by the rate of inflation and so on and so forth, right? So this is all that this spreadsheet does. So before playing around with the spreadsheet a little bit, I'm just going to pause and again ask you, Vijay, if you have any questions. Hello, Vijay, are you there?
Yes, Ajay. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Tell me.
So any questions on the spreadsheet?
Not really. I think the one point I would have to make is the spreadsheet looks good, but a lot of mental challenge in putting in these numbers. And I don't know if people really know what's an ideal inflation and return expectation. And like you mentioned, the returns can be expected like 12%, but the asset allocation has to be earned right for that. And I would like to see that other video. I was not part of the other session, but that's, I think, very important to get this thing going. Yes.
Okay, so now let's play around with this, okay, the spreadsheet. So suppose I make the inflation 8%. Okay, so now you see I have a huge negative, right? So you can see how sensitive this is to the inflation rate, right? Because what is happening is that now your expenses, the 313, are growing at 8% instead of 6%, right? So now if you took 8% and 12%, so the gap is now only 4%, right? So if you did this, then and you made this say 250, then you have a surplus. But suppose you made it 275, then you are negative. So your correct figure is somewhere probably close to 260 or 265. Okay, so 265 is pretty close. Okay. So basically, you say, okay, now let's say this individual said, hey, I don't think inflation is going to be 6%. I think it's going to be 8%. So you put 8% there and you say that, okay, you can still spend 265, right? So still the psychological thing is accomplished, right? Like the thing. Now the person says, no, but hey, I really don't think I'm going to earn 12%. Who knows what's going to happen to the stock market? Let's plan at a more conservative thing. So suppose I make this 10%, right? Now, again, I have a huge negative, right? So if I make this 200, I'm surplus, right? So then the person says, oh, okay, now even if inflation is 8%, even if my return is 10%, I'm still good, right? So this gives a huge degree of comfort, right? And if you have difficulty in, thinking about whether it should be 6, 12 or whatever, you can take these as the default numbers, right? And then play around and understand. So the key thing that you've got to understand is that, so I'm putting it back to this 313 and all that kind of thing where we started. Okay. So this is a very useful planning tool because I have seen so many people who are retired. So first thing is that they don't know what their corpus is, right? So this corpus size in lakhs, right? We just said half 4,000, right? But they have no idea because it's called scattered, right? It's scattered all over the place. And then it could be in different types of assets. There could be gold, there could be jewelry, there could be paintings, there could be real estate, there could be mutual funds, there could be stocks, etc. So what corpus size do you take, right? Now that's again a decision up to you, right? I kind of say that just take your liquid corpus, and slowly you might want to think if you have investment properties where you're not staying in, and this is your primary residence, then you can monetize some of those and start including it. So those are the, again, questions. So you may have heard the term being very house rich, but cash poor. So I don't know, even among your relatives, at least in my relatives and friends, I have sometimes visited people in, say, a colony like Panchsheel Park in Delhi, where there's just an elderly couple, their children are overseas, and they're staying in this very valuable piece of property, very large house on a 500 square yard plot in Panchsheel Park. But when you go into the house, it looks absolutely run down and shabby because even though they may have the money, they don't have the energy to maintain that house. So would it make sense to sell that house and move into a smaller house and, enjoy? These are the kind of questions that you can ask yourself if you're using this for planning purposes and securing and enjoying your retirement, right? Okay. So Vijay, again, I'm going to turn to you to see whether any of this made sense and how this playing around with the sheet. Do you think it's easy, and would it help you answer questions if you were trying to advise someone who was old?
Yes, so having done this in the past, I realized that this is very important for people to understand the impact. Like you mentioned, even a 1%, even a 0.5% change in inflation or uh, the return rate can massively impact your returns. And a lot of people would have seen that in the past 3 years, wherein not only has inflation been high, but income has not income. I mean, the returns on your income have also been high, right, with the stock market. So
Yeah.
it's very important to understand the delicate balance, I would say, between inflation going at 0.5% versus your returns going as well. So this is very useful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I also want to say from a personal experience, right? So as my father was aging, and I was helping manage his finances. So he told me, at the age of 83, saying, I'm really worried that I'm going to run out of money. So, and, at that stage, he had 5 crores of money. And he was 83, right? So, and he wasn't keeping very good health. So he died at 85 or so. So the thing was, I was a little surprised as to saying, why does he think he's going to run out of money? And then I found that, he had all this anxiety, partly about, reaching the end of life, but also about the thing that, oh, medical costs are going up, I might need 24-hour care. Do I have enough money? So, because even though he was an engineer and he was a very successful executive, Also, he was aging. Maybe he had a little bit of dementia coming in or whatever. But the thing was that he hadn't done the maths, because then when I did the thing for him, I said, okay, how much would a heart bypass operation cost? Right? How much would like 24-hour care cost? And how will you, run out of money, because your 5 crores is also growing, right? Because it's invested, right? So there's almost no scenario that you can think of where you're going to run out of money. Even prior to that, like he was on various boards and till the age of 75. And they would pay for his travel and staying in a 5-star hotel. And he used to love that. So after he stepped down from boards, I used to tell him, when he could still travel and things, that, you like this so much, why don't you just check in into a 5-star hotel yourself and, spend money, right? But he could never bring himself to do that. And then by the time he became 80, it became very hard for him to travel on his own, right? So, so that's the key psychological message that I want to leave with all the people that are listening to this or will listen to it, is that you have a finite amount of time left. And, you might as well, if you have the resources, spend on whatever gives you joy, or give money. Like suppose you create even a foundation, which is something that I'm thinking of doing, maybe if I reach 75 or whatever, which will further whatever you are interested in, and, help the world become a better place, right? That can give you joy. So enjoying your retirement is not only like playing golf and having, expensive scotch and, whatever else, but because there's only so much of it you can do. But it's also about maybe trying to make a better world, or do something that you ever want to do, which, maybe take a course at Harvard or whatever it is that your aspiration, or follow cricket and watch every single, World Cup and wherever it's held in the world, or go to the Olympics or do whatever, right? Okay, so this was why I call this also enjoying your retirement. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move on to the next thing about how do you save to build a corpus for your retirement, right? So before I move, Vijay, one more chance for anything on this topic. Okay, anything that you want to comment, or should I move on?
No, I think you've covered a good set of basics, right? From understanding the relationships between not only inflation income and growth of your assets, along with the conservative mindset, right? Like you mentioned of your parents, same with a lot of people, where we don't know how much we've earned, saved, how much it is earning. So this is more to make you conscious of what you have. So that's perfectly summed up. Thanks, Sanjay.
Yeah, and the other sessions on your asset allocation and the balance sheet will help feed into this, right? That's why so the most important thing is asset allocation. The next most important thing is your balance sheet, because that tells you where your money is and what is your corpus and how much is your return, right? So if you do it properly, if you listen to that session, it'll be easy for you to answer that. Okay, so moving on to the next sample. And as you can see, it's kind of similar with the red, green, and yellow. Same thing, input by user, calculated guess. And here is the end value of the corpus that you desire. And so in this case, the desired corpus was this 4592. The difference, you can see, so this will get calculated. Now, for this person, the current age is 20. Okay. The age you want to plan till is 60. So you think that you will retire at 60, and you can change these around. So the years left are 40. Now, in this case, this person was a lot more precise, and they said that inflation is going to be 5.7%. And the corpus return, they said, was going to be 13.5%, because they were going to be more aggressive. Okay. And their desired corpus at retirement in today's money was, this shouldn't be your current, okay, was 5 crores in today's money, right? So they said that if I have 5 crores in today's money, that will be enough. I think this should say your desired corpus. Today's, right? So this individual said, okay, I'll be happy if I had 5 crores at the age of 60 in today's money. So that then gets calculated that if you're going to have 5 crores in today's money, that then it's actually 45.92 crores in 40-year money. Now, this is a surprising number, right? I mean, like it's 5 crores, 45 crores. And if you ask someone saying, I'm 20 years old, in 60 years, I need to have 46 crores or close to that when I retire, then people will say, how is this even possible? I mean, I'll have to save like a huge amounts of money or make huge amounts of money. Okay. And this is the guess number. Now, the thing is that with these set of numbers, and we can check the math, if you save only 2 lakhs, so your current corpus today is 5 lakhs. Okay, so this is your current corpus. And this is the corpus at retirement is the corpus value in at plan till age. Okay. And then, of course, you change this number till you get the desired corpus to come close to your end value, right? Okay. So in this case, so how does this math work? So your starting corpus is 5, okay, which comes from here. Your corpus gain plus income. So now why this number is 13.5 is that you're also getting some income where you are saving and all that kind of stuff. So that's also growing, right? So you may end up getting more salary, more savings, more this thing, etc., right? So rather than making this very complicated, and we will have a more complicated thing in the last section, which is the budgeting one. But here we're trying to say that, okay, my average return is going to be 13.5%. Right? So I get this 13.5%. So this is basically this 5 into this is 13.5. My saving is 2 lakhs. Okay. So I'm going to be growing my corpus, and this saving we are taking to grow at the rate of inflation, right? So you can see here, because of rounding, it's just 222, but it becomes 3 and so on and so forth. And then your saving increases to sort of 17 lakhs or something later. And then your end corpus is just this thing here. Okay. And then the math takes over, right? So now this spreadsheet, if you look at it, it's pretty surprising, right? So if you start early and you can save, say, 2 lakhs a month to start off with, and then increase your saving at the rate of inflation, you can end up with a corpus of 46 crores. right at the age of 60. Okay. And for quite a few people who have a corpus today at 5 lakhs. Now, the age 20 might be a little too young. So suppose we make the age 30. Let's see what happens. Okay, now I'm got a huge difference. So I need to increase the savings, say, to 3. I still have a difference. So the end value, but it's positive, the difference. So like, okay, why did this? The corpus at retirement. So this is in today's money, and 1 plus B in inflation into the number of years. Yeah. So now I'm only, so I want to get 26 crores. So if I say my current corpus is 5 years, then this particular desired thing is going. So I might come to 2.5. Okay. Or if I come back to 2, then the difference is also 2.25. Okay. Okay. So 1.75. Yeah. So here the annual savings is just 1 lakh. So if you're 30 years old and you say, I need only 5 crores when I retire, then you're thinking, but now if you say, I need 20 crores when I retire, right? Then there's a huge gap. So then you need to save, say, 5 lakhs as marginal, and you can make it like 5.2. So that makes it positive. Okay, so your end value then is 10.551 crores at the age of 60 is what you will have. And in the current thing, your desired corpus is, yeah, so it will be 105 crores. And here it's 220 crores, right? In today's money that you want, right? So you can do this whole planning. And the key part here is that this should encourage you psychologically to think about how much are you saving today? How can you increase your saving? And the saving comes from 2 parts. One is trying to increase your income, and the other is trying to reduce your expenses. So let's talk about increasing income. So today, increasingly, like suppose you're married, maybe your spouse works, maybe she doesn't work, or things like that. Or it could be the other way, that your spouse works and you don't work. In there, you take care of the home and the children and all that kind of stuff. So whatever the situation, but these days there you can do part-time work. You can, aside from that, supplement your things. You can learn something, invest in yourself, which may be the best investment, and increase your earning, right? Like, so you can even do, like, hone your AI skills or whatever, if you're a software person, or if you want to advance in the business field, maybe do an MBA, like an executive education type of thing, or some other kind of skill, in, say, social media marketing or whatever it is. So you can increase your income, right? So a lot of people, they don't focus on that part, right? Like they say, okay, this is a given, I'm going to get this 10% raise every year. Some years, if our company does really well, maybe I'll get a bonus, all that kind of stuff. So they take that pretty much as a given, that I'm on this path. but you can step up to another path. Like, for instance, I personally took a risk of leaving a very cushy job at Citibank at the age of 42 or 40, I think, and trying to do a startup, which didn't work out. But then I ended up joining PayPal on the management team, which worked out like really well. So I went on a different path, right? And because I had savings, I had the ability to take that risk for doing that, right? So one of the things that you have to think of, especially in the early years, is to try and create optionality. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about this optionality and how at least I created it. So the thing is that there is always the temptation to spend a lot when you're young because of this thing called YOLO. You only live once, right? But there's also the my four-letter abbreviation, which is that you may live long, right? So if you live long, then if you don't save, then you'll have a miserable retirement, right? So this YOLO and YMLL has to be balanced. So if you say party 4 times a month, you will probably get the same enjoyment by partying 2 times a month, and you can increase your saving, right? This thing of how, and one of the things that I did was that when I was on the international staff of Citibank, and when I reached the US, I had to buy a car, and I could have bought a pretty expensive car. You know, it's really nice. The cars are relatively cheap. The roads are good. You enjoy driving. But then I found I had no driving record in the US. So my insurance would have been really expensive. So I said, okay, for a couple of years, I'm just going to buy a Toyota Corolla, which was an entry-level car in the US. And my colleagues told me, this is not really good. You're a real miser because you're not spending on, and it's not good for your status. And, you're a vice president and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't listen to them. And I did that. Similarly, when I bought a home, the conventional wisdom was that you take a mortgage to the maximum extent that you can take, because then the leverage that you get on your equity is going to be pretty large, and there's some good tax breaks and all that in the US. But I said, no, I don't want to be saddled with a high EMI. So I will buy a house, and the house that we bought was probably 25% of what we could have afforded. Right? But it was very adequate for our needs. And we also bought a house in a bad school district area. So the property taxes were low because we managed to get admission for our son in a public school in a good area. So we did a fair amount of financial planning around this. I don't want to get into too much details in the interest of time. But what I'm saying is that if you occupy your mind in thinking, how can I increase my savings by increasing my income, reducing my expenses without sort of compromising on enjoyment too much, right? Because it's correct. You are like YOLO, right? You only live once. So if you keep very, very tight this thing and this thing, you're not going to enjoy your young years, which would be terrible, right? So you need to balance these out, right? But if you see and you look at the math, the thing is that here you have like this thing of 5.2 lakhs, which is about 40,000 rupees a month, right? Now, if your salary is like 1,20,000 a month, then 30% is 40,000. Okay. So that may not be that much of a stretch. Now, yes, maybe at 30, a salary of 1,20,000 may be high, whatever. So you can do the math whichever way you want, right? And so suppose we keep this saying that the corpus at retirement that I want is 10,551, right? or something like 105 crores. Okay. And I changed my thing to 35. Okay. So now I have to increase this to 3,000. So something like, okay, 2,750. Okay, that's close, or 2,700. Okay, so, the thing is that, yeah, so here with these kind of numbers, the amount you save doesn't change very much. But really speaking, the earlier you start saving, okay, the better you would be in terms of the amount that you need to save to reach your desired goal. Okay. So this is the thing on saving and how you can calculate this. And the important psychological messages that you should take away from this is that it is not hard to build a corpus uh, which is adequate for a good retirement. So if you went to the previous sheet, the spend calculator thing, so your corpus size in lakhs, 40 crores, that's not too hard to build. Okay. And so this is something that, so I'm going to pause here and ask Vijay on what kind of questions he has and put these back to the previous numbers. Yeah.
Thanks, Sanjay. I think it helps in giving people a perspective of where we are in life and what we have to do. I think, like you mentioned, when we're younger, we tend to spend a little more subconsciously or unconsciously. And the idea of this sheet is not to scare people into going down the complete frugality route, but the idea is you have planned expenses, plan out your fun, and it's not difficult to meet these targets. Another thing is to listeners who may be in their 20s who think, hey, I'll never get to such a high salary or such a high net worth. It's possible either by, like you mentioned earlier, upskilling, getting those side hustles, maybe getting a side income, doing something else on the side, uh, getting into maybe real estate investing, whatever works for you. But the idea is to nudge you towards those. And these numbers are a nudge to get you to where you plan. So those would be my thoughts, Sanjay.
Yeah. So the other aspect is that, see, if so I just want to spend a little bit of time on how important it is for younger people to have a fairly large allocation to equity, right? For their long-term savings. So, and this is really a tragedy. So I have written a white paper on how Indians collectively had an opportunity loss of 5 lakh crores in the period 2000 to 2020 by being too conservative and investing in fixed deposits to a very large extent, right? So the way I calculated that 5 lakh crore number was that if 60% of the fixed deposit money had moved into index equity funds, that is the difference, right? So if you look at the percentage of households who invest in equity in whatever form, stocks, mutual funds, whatever, okay, it's very low. It's less than 10%, right? Now, to make the case for equity investing, I'm going to give you one more example, which will probably shock you, but we can actually see this work out, right? So, so let's take the Reliance Growth, or no, sorry, Nippon now, Nippon Growth Fund. Okay, this is a mutual fund. So I'm saying Nippon Growth Fund, okay? And okay, so So you see the NAV of the Nippon Growth Fund is 3,278, okay, for the regular option. And if I take the direct option, oh, it's not declaring. Let's see. Here, suppose I say, okay, Nippon Growth Fund, direct growth. Okay, it's 3557.81. Now, this fund started on 8th October 1995, when the NAV was 10. Okay, so if you had put 1 crore in this fund on 8th October 1995, it would be worth 355 crores today, right? That is a huge appreciation, right? Okay, so the thing is that, people say that I bought this piece of real estate and it's appreciated. Now, of course, 1995 and now is almost 30 years. But if you look at property, and again, I have a life case, like my father had bought this property in Pune in 1985, and it was a pretty good area, developed well and all that kind of stuff, for 5 lakhs. When he died, we sold this in, say, 2015, for, which is about 30 years, for 1.5 crores, right? It went up only 30 times, while this went up 335 times, right? So again, you've got to get this clear in your mind. And then equities have this advantage that you can get in and out fairly quickly without, like real estate, you're stuck. Now, some other people put it in gold. Fixed deposits are quite terrible because they only meet inflation. So, when you are talking about why does the stock market do well? It does well because it's taking into account growth plus inflation. So if you take a company, their sales should track nominal GDP growth, and in fact do better than nominal GDP growth. Because GDP has things like slow-moving things like agriculture and all that, right? So expecting a sort of 15% long-term return in Indian equities if growth continues to be about 6 to 7% and inflation continues to be about 6% is very reasonable. Okay. So the thing is now, I would just caution you that because I've seen a lot of young people's portfolios and I don't know the rest, but just their mutual fund portfolio with 100% allocation to equities, some of them. Now that can be dangerous because if you lose your job or you need money and you have to sell equities when markets are down, you can lose real money, right? So you want to put your long-term savings in equity. Again, this is covered more in detail in the asset allocation session. Okay. So any comments on this, Vijay? This example of Nippon growth, did that shock you a bit?
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent point because Indians are not really used to, we necessarily used to equity investing. It's only in the past 10, 15 odd years, the noise around it has increased. So there's most people have to know it's more safe now, equity. Even the large caps, mid caps, relatively safer. And it's much, and it's needed. It's not an option anymore as it was maybe 20, 30 years ago. Right now, it's needed if you want to keep your asset growth more than inflation. And that's the goal, as you mentioned in the previous part of the video, right? Your returns have to beat inflation. So equity is the only way to do that nowadays. FDs aren't going to cut it. And yeah, that helps.
So, and like lots of people's parents are very conservative, right? Because they're not exposed to all this, right? So what we've had is people who have become members of Bharosa Club, they have used the investing playground on Bharosa Club to show their parents, how this works, okay, and use all these tools to change their behavior. So in one particular case, there was a person whose mother was quite wealthy, and had a lot of fixed deposits. Okay. And after saw this, she took almost a year and a half to get convinced. But now she's slowly moving all her fixed deposits into equities. Okay. And then what's happening is that as she's seeing the returns, she's even prematurely liquidating those fixed deposits because she realizes the penalty is very low and moving them into equities, right? So now she's almost 100% into equities. Okay. Not 100%, but she basically has something, maybe 80% into equities and 20% into safe. So that is the thing where you can not only use this for yourself, but you can use it for your friends and family. And lastly, what we do is, because we understand the power of equities and wealth creation, we have also used this for our domestic help. So we don't give them a Diwali bonus. We just spread it out, divide by 12, take 1 month's salary, divide it by 12. That's their bonus. And do an SIP for them. Right. So initially there was some resistance because they love getting that lump sum at Diwali and blowing it up. But we told them about it and explained it to them. And then now they've been doing it for 5-6 years. They've seen tremendous amount of growth, and they are actually putting their own money into equities. Right. So that gives us a lot of satisfaction because we are being able to change the behavior and hopefully improve the lives of many people. Okay. So I would encourage people, like if you just want to go and use Bharosa and use the investment playground, or if you have a very small portfolio, you don't want your portfolio analyzed, it's all free, right? Because only if you have a portfolio which is greater than 1 lakh or some number like that, then you have to pay 2,500 rupees per year per PAN. But otherwise, quite a few of the tools like the investment playground are available for free, right? So you can really encourage your friends and families to join Bharosa, use the free services, and they don't pay a penny, and hopefully get a lot of benefit. Okay. So with that, I'm going to move on to the next section. Unless Vijay, do you have anything you wanted to say at this point?
No, nothing right now, Sanjay. Thank you.
Okay, fine. So the next section is on budgeting. Now, this is where you can essentially get fairly complicated if you want to. But the idea is that, like companies prepare budgets, like 5-year plans, this, that, and the other, etc. So similarly, you can prepare your plan till the whatever age you want, right? So in this case, we said inflation is 6%, corpus is 13%, planning years are 27, initial corpus is 500, initial recurring expenses are 40, initial recurring income is 100. Okay. So this and corpus at the end of the planning period in future money is 5484, and corpus at the end of the planning period in today's money is 1137, and these are user input, right? So here you're starting with 2024 and going on all the way to 2050. So how does this work? So you have to put the non-recurring expense and the non-recurring income, okay, into this sheet. And we are normally doing this up to the time that you retire, right? So it's a budgeting exercise till you retire, because after you retire, then maybe the spend calculator thing is good enough, right? Because while you are, in your initial years, you can have expenses like maybe your children's marriage, your children's college education, etc., etc., or you may want to buy a house, so you need a down payment of a house. You may get an inheritance and all that kind of stuff, right? So the save calculator example may be too basic, right? You may want to do a little more analysis, right? So here you have this, you have your corpus growth, you have your recurring expenses, okay, in there, and here the unit might be like in thousands. So your initial corpus is 5 lakhs, your expenses, initial recurring expenses are 40,000 or whatever in there, and that seems a little low. But whatever. So you can play around with it. And your non-recurring expenses, you have things like, now you see this 200, which is down payment on a house. Okay. You see here a non-recurring income, which is 400, which is an inheritance. Okay. So like this, you can have non-recurring expenses and non-recurring income, which you input and see what your end result is, right? Now, your recurring expenses can go up by the inflation automatically. Your corpus growth goes up, and your recurring income, okay, is 100. Why has this become 0? I don't know. Okay, so yeah, so this sheet has some errors which I'll correct before I this thing, in there. But the whole idea is that we can try and correct it even now, is that like if this figure was the recurring income into the inflation rate, which was 6%. Oh no, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna do this later. Okay, so but the whole idea is that you can use this template to do your budgeting. Okay, and see how much is your corpus at the end of the planning period in future money and in today's money. Right? So this is a little bit more of a detailed and refined exercise, okay, of coming to the same answer, like what the rough, quick and dirty save calculators thing did. Okay, so any questions on this?
So this is roughly to budget during your income years, and the idea is to show you the future value of present day money taking into account purely inflation.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Also, it's things like, like doing this what if analysis. Like, see here, it says that, let's say I'm in a rental housing, okay, and I want to buy a house, right? So my thing is that now I decide to buy it in 2028. I could shift it to 2030 and see what's the impact. Now I could change my recurring expenses, because my recurring expenses will go up because now I have an EMI that I have to pay for the house, right? So it may not just be pure inflation, right? So you can set a step up in your recurring expenses and then have inflation cover it and so on and so forth. So you have to use this intelligently, right? And use some what if type of things. So clearly, buying a home is not a great financial decision because the yields are very low. And, if you can stay in a rental property and you don't have emotional baggage that I don't own a home, then it's a good thing, right? But there are the emotional sides of owning a home, right? So you got to balance that out, right? So this is a little bit of a complex kind of exercise. If you have difficulty in doing this, then you can always try and either use a friend who might do this for you for free, or you can use a advisor. And there are registered investment advisors who will do this for a fee, and they are trained to do that. They've passed various exams, like the RI exams and the CFP things and so on and so forth. So they can do that for you for a fee, and it might be very useful for you to do it. So the whole idea is that if you use these kind of tools, then you can have a much more informed discussion with whoever is advising you, or you can use them yourselves if you are good enough to, or you have the interest and the ability to do your own personal finance, right? So that's the whole thing about budgeting. So let's do a little bit of an exercise since we have a little bit of time to try and fix this spreadsheet. So we're saying that this person has an initial corpus of 5 lakhs. Now, the initial recurring expenses of 40,000 a year is really low. So let's say the initial expenses are also 5 lakhs, okay? And the initial recurring income also is, if it's annual, of 100 is very low. So let's say this person earns, if they are having 5 lakhs of expenses in a year, and that's 30%. So maybe they're earning 15 lakhs or 20 lakhs a year. Okay, so that they're earning 20 lakhs a year. So their corpus is 500. Their corpus growth is 65. Their recurring expenses are 500, and then growing like this. The non-recurring expenses, we put in some numbers, and their non-recurring income, their recurring income is, now this is where this thing was. So this is into bracket 1 plus, sorry, 1 plus the inflation. Okay, and then we drag this down. Oops. No, yeah, we need to dollar this. Yeah, okay, and we drag this down. Okay, and fix the decimals. Yeah, okay. So now we have this thing, right? So you can see that in this scenario, you're getting some kind of numbers, and then you can play around with all this kind of stuff. So now in the down payment of a house, suppose this 2 lakhs is very little. So I make it like that 20%. So I'm buying a house of say 1 crore. So I put 20% down. So let's say it's 2,000. Okay. And stuff like that. Then, I have like another 2,000 which comes in here, and another 2,000 which comes in here, and another 2,000 which comes in here, whatever. So, okay. So all these kind of things you can do and see how your corpus changes. Okay. So of course, because I'm just playing around, I'm not putting in real numbers and doing a serious exercise. But do you get the idea of how you can do this, Vijay?
The idea is to extrapolate and
Yeah.
factor in those variables that will make it, that are real life variables. You might get a hike, match inflation every year. You might get a bonus. You
Yes,
might
exactly.
do an EMI. So we have to input all those inflows and outflows, at least the bulk ones,
Yeah.
into this. Yeah.
And a good idea is to note down all your assumptions, right? And how often should you do this? You should probably do it once a year, okay? And your planning years will keep coming down, and this will become more accurate as you go forward, right? So, because you have less, like when you are planning for 27 years, there's so many assumptions, right? You don't know what's going to happen, right? But that doesn't mean you don't do it, right? You can do it, make some assumptions. It's okay, right? It's just a tool for you, right? So now you can also do some exercises, because I remember when I came back from the US to India, there was some concerns in the family that, you're too young to retire, how will you, like, you don't want to work, you're not going to get any income, blah, blah, blah. So even my wife was a little concerned. So I actually hired a third-party financial planner, because if I did the planning, nobody would believe me, right? Because these are complex numbers. So I hired someone and paid them, I think at that time, 25,000 rupees to develop a financial plan for me. And, it was quite an interesting exercise, because I told them that, they asked me, how often would you replace your car? So I said, okay, maybe every 5 years or 3 years, something I said. Now, it so happens that if you replace your car too often, then it has a huge impact on your expenses, right? So anyway, my net worth was high enough, for it all to work out. But the thing was that when I looked at the details, I said, this number and expenses seems very high. So what is this? So then we changed the assumption to I'll replace the car every 10 years. Yeah, made a huge difference, right? Now, this is the psychological part that I'm talking about, because then you realize that, hey, I'm not going to replace my car. I'm going to use it for 10 years. Or nowadays, of course, you have things like Uber, so I even own a car. But, so these are all questions. Then you say, okay, I'm going to pay for my um, sons or daughters' college education, right? And that's going to be in the US. Now, that could be a huge amount, right? Like 50 lakhs or something a year, and for 4 years, right? Now, if you say, hey, no, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to have my son or daughter take a loan, and I will sort of guarantee that loan. But it'll be in their name, and once they start earning, they will pay it back. So then your son or daughter might say, hey, do I really want to go and study in the US, or can I go to some place in India, if they are capable enough and if they can crack some of the exams, which are pretty tough, or should I go to a place like Singapore or Australia or whatever? And even if I go to this thing, can I get a scholarship? All those kind of things become relevant, because now they are spending their own money, and you are not dependent on them for your that you expect them to spend on you when you are old, but you are also disciplining yourself. Same thing with marriage, right? Now, you may say, okay, like this is my budget for your marriage. Now, you may want to have a grand wedding. That's okay. I don't know who you will marry, but this is my budget. The rest you can spend. Now, if you don't spend that money, which is my budget, you just go over and have a court marriage, I'll give you that money, as a gift. But, so these are things that, one is you just approach this thing like a mechanical exercise, right? I'm putting in numbers and I want to, that to me is not very productive. But if you approach this as a thinking exercise and help you take decisions on what is going to be your approach to this whole business of getting rid of financial anxiety and managing your life and setting expectations right, then it can be very powerful. Okay. So any comments on that, Vijay?
Thanks, Sanjay. A few thoughts, if I may. So the first thing is the whole idea of this exercise is to create a framework.
Yeah.
And the whole point of a framework is you don't get that anxiety suddenly in the middle of the night. Oh my God, do I have enough for this medical emergency? The idea is when you consult your framework, everything is, moving according to plan. You know where the gaps are. You know you have a plan to fill it. So the frameworks use this for you to check it maybe once a year, but the idea is to also uh, not get that anxiety around it. The second thing is being conscious. The whole idea is not to uh, mechanically note it down, like you said, but to be conscious of what's happening in your financial life. And the more conscious you are and the more you have a framework around it, the less you actually have to think about it on a daily basis. You only think about it maybe once a year, twice a year, that's about it. And the last thing was around budgeting. Uh, I know people in 30s like me, I know a lot of youngsters who look at it separately. They look at spending to not have a limit and income to be infinitely growing. That's not the case. The idea is uh, to be conscious again of where your money is going. I call it the flow of money. So where's the money flowing in? Where's the money flowing out? Look at it like a river, like a stream, and you will track these things down. Personally, a personal tip that I use is Splitwise. Me and my spouse use the app Splitwise to split our expenses. So it's possibly 10 seconds a day when, we make major expenses. And I do a financial exercise at the end of the year wherein I download the Excel and there I know how much I spent year on year. I've been doing this since the year I got married, so 5 odd years. So set in a framework, set in a plan, and that's what this Excel is trying to help people. So that's a good takeaway, Sanjay. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so that's the whole thing, that these are just tools for you to make sort of important financial decisions and reduce anxiety. I also want to stress on this thing of creating optionality. Right. So one is something about simplicity, right? So you can have 50 mutual funds and 20 stocks and 10 properties and all this kind of stuff. That creates a lot of management overhead. But you can achieve your same things with very simple things. So if you really look like mutual funds and you just had mutual funds in your portfolio, safe as well as risky ones, you could manage your whole thing very well. So if you take mutual funds, ETFs, without doing necessarily single stock investing and all that, now you could put a small amount for taking outside risks, right? You may have a friend who's doing a startup, you think it's going to go places, so you make some investment in that. But you're ready to write it off if it fails. So those are the kind of things that you should focus on. So to summarize, it's basically your asset allocation, your balance sheet, your how do you create optionality, how do you reduce financial anxiety, and how do you set expectations, right? So say suppose your kids are in their teen years, before they're like say 12, 13, whatever they are, right? So if you tell them that, look, this is how I'm planning for your college kind of stuff. So we'll help you. You can go anywhere you choose, but this is how your college will be financed. Right? If they're old enough to understand, then they will make wise choices. Like in my son's case, he went to the University of Chicago. Now, he was actually paying for his own college because I had set aside some money and given it to him because there are some plans in the US like 529 college fund and all that kind of stuff. So he evaluated like going to Berkeley, which was in California State, where the tuition was much lower, and going to University of Chicago, where the tuition was much higher. But he felt it would be a wiser choice for him to pay the higher amount and go there. But this was not my decision. This was his decision, right? And his money, in a way. So this whole business of inculcating financial planning, even with your children, is something which is very important. So we'll end. We have one more session, which will be on Saturday, which will be the last session, where we'll do some wrap up and all that kind of stuff. So we are out of time for this session. So thank you very much, Vijay, for attending this. I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Yeah.